TLDR. Your shortcut to bestsellers.
All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're tackling a book that's been making some serious waves. It's Peter Schweizer's The Invisible Coup, and it puts forward a really controversial idea that immigration is being used as a weapon by foreign powers. So let's break down the core arguments.
Right off the bat, the book sets an incredibly intense tone. It opens with this quote from Cicero, which immediately frames the whole issue not as a policy debate, but as a matter of national survival. It really lets you know this is going to be a high-stakes read.
So what is the book's central argument? Well, it claims there's a new kind of warfare being waged against the United States, and it's one that's hiding in plain sight. Let's really dig into what the author calls weaponized migration.
Everything in this book really hinges on this one word: subversion. The author's whole case is that what's happening at the border isn't just a crisis. It's a deliberate, coordinated strategy to undermine the U.S. from the inside. And the weapon being used? People.
Now, the author is very clear about one thing. He argues that his thesis is not the Great Replacement theory. You see, that theory usually focuses on domestic elites wanting cheap labor. The argument here is different. It's specifically about foreign governments using migration to achieve their own political and cultural goals. This quote from Judge Aaron Petty really gets to the core of the book's argument. It frames mass migration not as some natural, organic event, but as an intentional, man-made act. Likening people to living warheads, well, it's a pretty stark image, and it's meant to paint a picture of a new kind of warfare.
Okay, so to build this case, the author takes us back in time. We're going to look at what the book calls the proof of concept for this whole strategy, a historical event that it claims laid the groundwork for everything we're seeing today. And that event is the 1980 Mariel boat lift. Now, on the surface, this looked like a spontaneous humanitarian crisis, right? Thousands of people desperate to flee Cuba. But the author claims it was anything but spontaneous. He argues it was a calculated move by Fidel Castro to weaponize a refugee crisis against the United States. And here's where the story gets really dark. The book alleges that Castro used the thousands of legitimate refugees as human camouflage. Hidden among them, he secretly exported an estimated 16,000 to 20,000 people, criminals, spies, and individuals from mental institutions directly to American shores. You know, the Carter administration initially welcomed the refugees, famously with an open heart and open arms. But according to the book, they quickly realized something was very wrong. The author uses quotes like this one to argue that even back then, officials on the ground knew this wasn't just a humanitarian mission. It was a hostile act. So, the main takeaway here, according to the book, is that the Mariel boat lift wasn't just some isolated incident. It was a successful experiment. It essentially proved that a superpower's borders could be overwhelmed, and it created a playbook for how other adversaries could do the exact same thing. Okay, let's jump from the past to the present day, because now we get to the book's primary and probably most explosive case study, an alleged decades-long strategy by Mexico. The author introduces this idea with some pretty jaw-dropping quotes, like this one from Mexico's then president. This is presented as evidence for a concept the book calls the Reconquista. So what does that actually mean? Well, according to the book, this isn't a military plan with tanks and soldiers. It's a much more subtle, long-term strategy. The alleged goal is to culturally and politically detach the American Southwest from the rest of the country by creating a huge population there that remains loyal to Mexico, not to the United States. So how would this even work? Well, the book lays out what it claims are the specific tactics being used. We're talking about a massive network of consulates acting as community organizers, powerful lobbying groups, even shipping textbooks with an anti-American narrative into U.S. schools. The author argues it's all designed to stop assimilation and maintain loyalty to Mexico. But the argument doesn't stop with just cultural influence. The book claims this strategy goes a step further into direct political interference on American soil. And to give you a sense of the scale of this alleged operation, the author points to Mexico's huge diplomatic footprint in the U.S. We're talking over 50 consulates. Compare that to Great Britain with 8 or China with 5. The book argues this is way more than what's needed for normal diplomacy, and that it's actually infrastructure for a political operation. The book alleges these consulates operate with a clear 4-step strategy. First, they act as hubs for activism. Second, they partner up with domestic activist groups inside the U.S. Third, they actually train people on how to lobby and protest here.
And fourth, they use that power to influence American politics from the inside out. And the author presents this quote as the smoking gun, a former Mexican foreign minister supposedly admitting to a deliberate strategy to organize what he himself calls militant activities inside the United States. Okay, for the final piece of the puzzle, the book tries to connect this alleged foreign strategy to what it calls willing collaborators within the American political system, arguing that the two work hand in hand. Let's look at this number, 1.2 million. According to the book, that's how many new citizens were created in the 1996 election year alone under President Clinton's Citizenship USA initiative. The author argues this wasn't about patriotism, it was about politics. The book flat out calls this program a voter mill. Citing a later government audit, it claims that the citizenship process was rushed, requirements were dropped, and, crucially, FBI background checks were ignored. The alleged result? Over 75,000 applicants with arrest records were approved, creating a new block of voters that, according to the book, voted 85% for the incumbent party. And the crucial point the author makes is that 1996 wasn't a one-off. He argues it set a precedent, a repeatable political playbook where the integrity of the naturalization process is sacrificed for partisan gain, and he claims similar patterns popped up again in the election years of 2008 and 2022. So in the end, the Invisible Coup presents a deeply unsettling worldview, one that really challenges the conventional way we think about immigration. It leaves us with a final provocative question. In an age of hybrid warfare, what happens when a nation's greatest strengths, things like openness and generosity, are seen by its adversaries as its greatest vulnerabilities?